how much we have to feel when we actually do that softening. Then we feel all of the pain or the shame or whatever is underneath that mask of like, but I'm gorgeous and badass and I've got it together and everything's great, but something underneath that's like, I actually really just want to be loved, but I'm afraid if I let you love me, you'll leave me.
Welcome, my love. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
I feel like so much has transpired for you since we last had you on the show. I think it may have even been 3 years ago. It was right around the time I think you were filming for your guest expert slot on, I want to say Love Island, but it wasn't Love Island. I'm getting
Too hot to handle.
What was it on? Too hot to handle. Yes. Oh my God. Rachel and I watched it together and we're like, there she is. So I remember it was, how long ago was that? Was that like a few years ago?
That was in 2021. So that was almost 3 years ago. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Because my partner and I had been together for like 6 months and he came with me. We were sort of locked in a house together. And I thought, well, this is going to make or break us as a couple. And we weren't a part of the reality show in the sense that like we were there as experts, but it was kind of like, we're also locked in a house together because they made us quarantine. And so it was like, prisoner in paradise because we couldn't go have a walk on the street. Like we weren't allowed to go walk around. But there was like the ocean behind the house. So you could go swim, but you couldn't go take a walk. Oof. And we're in like this really beautiful villa, but we ended up having so much fun. We brought like all the fun toys that you would want to have if you're like in a kind of luxury villa by the sea, but you can't leave it. So we brought like blow up floats for the sea and snorkels and like psychedelics. And okay, don't tell anyone that because it's been years. Okay, we don't do that anymore.
Just kidding.
We don't travel.
Just kidding.
And we watched movies and we cooked and it was actually, we had so much fun. It was like such a fun kind of initiation in our relationship of like, okay, look, I know it's like a high luxury it's like, how could you not have fun flying first class with being in a villa and like all of this, but
with the wrong person, pretty easily.
The wrong person, yeah. You could drive each other pretty bananas, especially if you can't leave the house, especially for masculine. I think for anyone, but I know for my man, he definitely likes to roam. I think that, for him to be like, essentially, you can't leave this house. The last few days, he was like, we're busting out. Let's go take a walk. I'm like, oh my God, what if we get in trouble? Anyway.
Oh my God.
Time ago. My life's completely different now.
Well,
we've had a baby.
More. Yeah, say more. It obviously is going well. You guys have just had a baby.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Yeah, so we have a 3-month-old. I'm sure by the time this podcast comes out, she'll be older. But yeah, we've been together almost 4 years now, and my partner and I met at a wedding that you were at of our dear friends. And that was right around the time that my first book came out, Fuck Like a Goddess, which really felt like it was about healing some of the core feminine wounding around our sexuality and body image and our voice and speaking up. And really like the message of the book was like, fucking like a goddess is reclaiming all of yourself. It's not really just about sex, more of a metaphor in a way, but about redefining your relationship to your body, to your sexuality, to being too much or not enough, for speaking up in the world. And so that book was really important to that time in my life because it was like, okay, I've done so much healing and teaching in this space with women. I want to share about it. And now my next book has come out, which is really about the relational space of the heart and emotions and intimacy, having the courage to feel deeply, to lean into intimacy. So I guess like any other artist, not all of them, but I definitely pull from my own material in my life. And I see that as such a great inspiring force, you know?
Yes. And the book I love, the new book's titled Dare to Feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
so
because
powerful.
the transformational path of the heart is the subheader. And, you know, the path of the heart is that relational space. And one thing I talk about is like that kind of my first book was like, if you look at the yogic system, it's like healing in the first, second, and third chakras. It's like empowerment, sexuality, the body, you know,
Yeah.
also the voice. But then it's like, okay, now that I've kind of reclaimed those essential forces, what happens when I move it up into the heart, into devotion, into compassion, into intimacy? It becomes less about me, becomes less about my power. It becomes more about us, like what works for
Mm.
us together, you and
Mm.
me and my beloved, me and my
Yes.
family, me and my community, me and life, which, you know, I think is part of the path for a lot of us. Like we got to do that kind of self-healing work and reclamation in order then to bring it to the space of we, of the community, of the family, of the dyad, all of that.
Yeah. And I think that's like one of the hardest, or at least in my experience, one of the hardest, most challenging, yet most rewarding stages of maturation as a human is like really mastering our impact on other humans. Like really, really feeling, seeing, knowing how we're impacting everyone else in the space, and not from that like people pleasing, victimhood, like malleable, bend over backwards, trying to shape around other people that women can often be really trained into. But exactly as you're saying, like going through the path of empowerment to kind of loop back around and reclaim that, I don't know, how would you describe it? That receptivity, that, yeah,
Yeah.
connectivity.
Yeah. And the ability to attune to when it's
Mm.
time to stand in your power and assert yourself, when it's time to listen, right? When it's time to, you know, show your brightest colors and your wildest self, and when it's time to show that to just your beloved, you know, like there's much more nuance, right? When we sort of come into the relational field, like you said, and we are maturing into the deeper attunement of like the moment and what the moment calls for. And each moment's going to be so different. And I don't know, I think it makes sense that we go through these different phases of our spiritual growth and our healing path, which I do think are two different things. Um, and that some of them are embarrassing in retrospect, but like with so much love, like a big sister looking back at yourself and going, "Oh, she's so cute. Look at her. She's like, you know, doing this and doing that." Not looking back at ourselves with judgment, but just knowing that some things we will outgrow in a way, you
Yeah,
know.
noticing the growth. Just like, wow, that's where I was then, and look where we are now, and imagine where we'll be in the future. Can
Yeah.
you speak a little bit to that distinction you just described? I want to double click on that, of like the difference between spiritual growth and our healing path.
Yeah. There are some great teachers that talk about this way better than me, but I'm going to give it a try. um,
I want your perspective.
Thank you. So healing has like a clear result in our lives. It's like, okay, like I want to heal around, let's say, scarcity. Like I come from generations and ancestors who experienced scarcity around food, and my parents passed that down around money, around everything. And so there's this kind of internal lack, right? Which is really ancient. Like it's through my let's say ethnic backgrounds that I'm a part of. Um, and now it lives through me, and I want to do the healing around that, right? So I'm going to do different practices and maybe therapy and awareness around that. And it's going to be a place that I work in. The healing has that component, right? The practice and the therapeutic. The, the, the simply the spiritual path. in a way acknowledges that all of it is okay and that there's really nowhere to get to. Um, and paradoxically, that there are different levels of awareness and awakening that we can have. Um, but I feel like I heard this described in a way where it was like, if you do spiritual practice to get somewhere, then you're doing healing, you're looking for healing, versus if you do spiritual practice as spiritual practice
Yeah.
because of your devotion, because of your simple stillness, wanting to be still, wanting to be in devotion, etc., then that's different, then that's a spiritual practice, not a healing practice. So, and when I heard that, I was like, oh, that's beautiful, because me coming to Divine Mother and saying, Divine Mother, like, please help me. I'm looking for your wisdom. I'm looking for your support. It's like, that's really different than me engaging in a practice of um, where I'm not asking for anything in return, and I'm not trying to get something in my life. I'm not trying to fix something in my life. I'm not trying to, change something in my life. And so spiritual practice is upstream from all of it. It's upstream from the healing. It's upstream from the kind of Middle Earth realm where we're like trying to figure all of our shit out as humans. And then in the spiritual practice, it's like we sort of step out of that a little. James Hillman, who's a great writer, who's a Jungian therapist, it was actually a letter that the Dalai Lama wrote to somebody, I can't remember who, and it wasn't the current Dalai Lama, it was a past one. But James Hillman wrote about it in his book, in the Blue Flame, no, Soul Code. I'll look it up and I'll tell you guys. Okay, so hold that thought. But in that letter, the Dalai Lama delineates between spiritual work and soul work, which I think is different than healing work. But I think soul work maybe has a little bit more of the healing. But he's like, think about a monk's path, like going up on a mountaintop. Up on a mountaintop, there's not a lot of life, right? It's like pretty still. You're not going to find tons of animals up there or tons of trees or whatever. It's like there's more stillness. Less things can live at that altitude. But you go down into like the swamplands and there's so much life. There's so much wildlife. There's so much, just like species. And you can look at that also if you look at like soul food, soul music, right? You look at someone and you say they're so soulful. They have experienced a lot of life. There's a lot of life there. And so that spiritual practice of walking up the mountain and sitting in that still place and communing with that essence of spirit, traditionally, I would call a more archetypally masculine practice, because it means leaving the family in a sense, or never having a family or a husband or a wife or whatever. And you're kind of on this path. It's like a hermit's path, or even some mystics maybe are in family and some aren't. But down in the soul and the valley, that's where everything's happening. The drama of humanity and life and family and sex and death and it's like, and I do think that's where a lot of that more kind of gritty healing work happens. And then the spiritual practice is like, yeah, what's upstream for that? Some people like to hang out in one or the other and not really cross-pollinate. Not that it's just that binary or anything, but I love that kind of delineation. And the soul is in the life is matter archetype, like from a depth psychology background kind of perspective. It's like mater is mother. It's all in the same Latin root. It's form, it's body, it's the meat of life, and that is related to the soul in a way. And yeah, you can, if you want to get all geeked out on that, you can go read some James Hillman and some Marion Woodman, and they'll tell you all about it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that. The meat of life. Yeah, I think I had Andre Decum on here maybe last year, and he was talking about Ken Wilber's work and this idea of waking up versus growing up. And I think it's really like what you're beautifully speaking to, of all that meat of life growing up that happens and can really only happen from my perspective in relationality. Like, I think I had a Jungian analyst, I'm forgetting her name, but on a couple of years ago, and I said to her about motherhood, like, what's surprised you most about like becoming a mom? And she goes, like if you choose not to have kids, it's beautiful. Like life is still an amazing ride, but you kind of get to go on believing you're a good person. And she's like, once you have kids, you like really see like, wow, I like the full spectrum of who you are, the mud and the muck and that like growing up that happens in intimate relationality versus the waking up, which is also super beautiful. I love how you described it, upstream. And yeah, I'm similar. I think both are wonderful and necessary, but it's, you don't want to get too stuck in the growing up or like bogged down in the healing path or like addicted to the cycles of transformation and breakthrough. Right. And you also don't, or like medicine or, whatever it is, all those sort of like little holes we can go down. But you also don't want to get so addicted to waking up that you're unable to relate to other people or refuse to see your own stuff, because that can happen if you're not used to having mirrors and you gain a lot of spiritual power. I've definitely seen that in community where someone's extremely spiritually powerful but really lacks the mirror of relationship. Well, what has been, the transformational path of the heart? I think we're kind of touching on it now, but I'd love for you to speak a little bit more to that. Like, what does that mean to you and what has that meant for you?
It's meant a lot. Like my book touches in quite a bit to the healing part, and it talks about it as being a spiritual practice, the act of opening your heart, and that itself is a practice, but it's also about the healing part, which the healing part is, hey, the practice is opening my heart, but wait, here's a demon, a boogeyman, a wall, a cave, like that's coming up in the act of my opening. Then I turn towards that, and then we hang out and do our jam, and that's the healing. So the spiritual practice is, hey, I'm going to open my heart here, and I'm going to open my heart here. Oh, wait, I can't open my heart here. Oh, interesting. Oh, there's some healing to be done, right?
Yes.
So what is that? Oh, I realize I have a little something there. Cool. I'm going to dive into that more deeply. But the spiritual practice of opening the heart, and it is a very feminine practice. And, in Richard Rudd, who created the Gene Keys, in his book about the Venus sequence, he's like, there's two paths to spiritual awakening, meditation or love. And, that's I'm glad he said that, not me, but he's not the only one necessarily. But the path of love is a traditionally more feminine path, because it's the path, like you said, of raising babies, historically speaking, and nurturing a home, historically speaking. Nurturing and loving a home is something huge. I think our sort of 80s power moms who were like, oh, I can work and I can be a mom and I can work out and I can like get my nails done. That was new. Women have been loving a home as a huge part of their life force and practice for thousands of years, and loving children. And that is a full-time job.
Yeah,
and it's like, pay people to do the loving of your home for you, and no shade if that's you. I do sometimes, but then it's like, well, if I can pay someone else to do the feminine loving, right, of care with food, or like making my bed look and feel so lovely, so when my beloved and I lay down, we just like feel enveloped in love. Like somebody else can do that, or I can pour my heart and my devotion into that, and so my beloved feels it the way that I've turned down the sheets for him, or my baby feels it the way that I'm caring for her. And so it's not a black or white. But why I'm saying this is because I do think that the path of love and the path of just loving as practice used to be just life for women. And there was definitely tons of repression and shadow and pain associated, right? I'm not trying to just skip over that. But sometimes I think we throw the baby out with the bathwater, which is a terrible old turn of phrase from, Britain back in the day. But but I think that, it's like, okay, now we're business women and we can do it all. But are
Well,
we
I
then
think that's the trap. That's the trap,
right?
is that we can do it all, or that we have to do it all. It's like the choice is beautiful. Like, choose
Yeah,
where to put your energy. But this idea that women have to do now just all of it, it's like,
totally.
whoa, that's super impossible.
Impossible.
What it is draining
Yeah,
as fuck. Yeah, like we have to choose where we put our energy. We get to choose, which is beautiful, but we can't do it all.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the path to me, what I love that Richard Rudd said, there's the path of love and the path of meditation. Meditation is more like you're quieting yourself from all of that external stuff so that you can hear that clarity, you can empty, you can find that awakening into that non-dual awareness, etc. Like, awesome. I'd love that also. But for me, I've been more drawn to, what is the path of love? What is it like to open to greater love, to be in devotion to something besides myself, to those around me. Um, Almost like if you think of like Amma, the hugging saint, like she's just in love, like path of love, devotion, hugging people all the time. It's like a super extreme example.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so my book is like what happens when we start asking ourselves to open that heart and what's coming up and through for us and how we stay with it, especially in the times that we're in. How do we stay with opening our heart, feeling what's there, feeling shame, feeling guilt, feeling joy, feeling bliss, feeling confusion, all of the things that are in that kind of dialogue when it's a heart to heart, like in that relational field. So my book has a lot of healing in it, a lot of like healing around
Yes.
intimacy. And then it has the greater whole container of like, yes, my practice is opening my heart, my spiritual practice, but let me get in the healing nitty gritty with you. Like, let me get into that, like, valley and the cave and all of that.
Yeah. And I love the way, like Patrick and I were kind of talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and we were just kind of having this conversation about how spoiled we are with our community, of which you're a part, and we feel spoiled by, the love of you and Eli, because all of our community in various ways are very devoted to healing, to transformation, and so there's not so much in the way, and so connection becomes easier, and I'm so grateful for that. I really don't take that for granted, of exactly what you're talking about, to go through the process of wanting to open your heart, recognizing all the stuff that's in the way of that, and lightening that load. And I mean, I think about myself, Patrick and I were having this conversation, and I was like, wow, like for me, there used to just be so much in the way. All I wanted was to connect, but because of the, historical filing cabinet, pain, trauma, etc., that we go through as human beings, there's just so much in the way, so much armor, so much fear, so much, exactly you said, the monsters, the boogeyman, all the things that pop out that get in the way. So yeah, it is such a blessing to encounter those beings, that there's an ease to connection, there's an ease to intimacy. And I just have so much respect for anyone willing to look and do this nitty gritty healing like you're talking about, because it's not for the faint of heart. I'm just like, thank you. Thank you. Because we feel it in the space, that ease to be heart to heart. And it's such a gift.
Yeah. And not everybody has kind of deep scars in the heart,
Yeah. Not everyone has so much in the way.
No. And like my book is for probably those who do have a complex relationship with intimacy, with trusting intimacy, with trusting people, with feeling held, letting yourself be held, letting yourself be loved, trusting that people are going to come through for you. Those are just some of the things that I have dealt with in those realms. And if you haven't had to do that this lifetime, great, fabulous. I'm sure you have work in other domains. And, Well, I'm sure we cross in some space, but I do know there's a lot of people out there who are like me and who have
Mm-hmm.
had trouble trusting men, trusting being, even trusting women. I don't know, like
Yeah, trusting.
trusting intimacy.
I'm right here. I'm with you. Yes, me.
and 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 it's just the ability for us to just be real with each other about it, and
Yeah.
I always long for in my work to just be like, I don't have it always together. But the thing is, I'm willing to be honest, share about it vulnerably, and do really hard work around it so that
Yes.
I can feel really clear to stand in my, expertise around it because I've done really hard work around it. Otherwise, I'm not going to talk about it or share about it in the same way. And it still doesn't mean that I'm like, have some like sort of shiny, perfect, got it together badge as a teacher, as a coach or a mentor. It's like, no, I can say like my partner and I worked really hard to create a secure attachment together. And it took us 2 years. I think I read someone else say it took them 7. And I felt like, wow, that's kind of amazing. You guys stayed with it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That takes a lot of courage. So that's
Yes.
part of the healing nitty gritty is like doing that part. But for us, what was holding it on a higher level is like that we both knew that this was our practice to stay with the hard edges and to not give up on ourselves. Whether or not that
Mm.
led us apart from each other, we weren't sure. But we knew that our greater practice was to stay with the hard moment, right? And that's a part of both of our
Yes.
spiritual work. So
Yes.
I
Yeah,
think
I
the
think
funny
it took
thing,
Patrick and I like 2 years. We had like a tricky negotiation period and then very secure bond. And then last year, massive rupture and shaking everything up. To then take about a year to re-enter, repair, secure bond again. And I think like what you're speaking to around being willing, and I always say that to clients, like you just need someone who's willing, like really like number one, you must be willing, they must be willing. Like that's the absolute requirement because yeah, it isn't about getting it perfect. It's not about we're never done, but it is about getting really fucking good at repair. Like even with my girlfriends now, being able to
yeah,
have those like uncomfortable conversations where you're like, hey, you said that and I felt this way, or I didn't like that. It made me feel like this. And the story I'm making up is that you don't trust me or, whatever, and just like stepping in when an old version of me, I never wanted to fucking, I just cut people out. I'm like, I'm fucking out of here. I'm just going to move city and change identities. Goodbye. Eat dust, and now it's like, staying in those hard conversations and getting to witness like one, you don't die. And it's uncomfortable just when you step in and then it's so beautiful. And of course we can't expect everyone to meet us there. That's the hard thing for people listening. They're like, okay, well, you might do that. And that's the other piece, that discernment of like figuring out who you can trust with your really tender bits of like,
yeah.
And
Yeah.
you spoke to trust, and I would love to hear more about that. Like, what was that path like for you of learning to trust? Because it's not a perfect world with perfect people that are all willing or doing the work. It's like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's something that's interesting that I see with women who, there are women who I was talking to a friend of mine, like she was like, now you're doing the most normie thing, right? Like you're in your late 30s and you just had a baby and like you were super alternative before when we were all having babies in our 20s. And I was laughing. I was like, oh right, that's true. Like there are a lot of people that like got married young, had babies young, and then there were the people that were like, oh, I don't really want to do that. I want to go pursue my dreams and I want to travel the world and I want to go on a spiritual path and I want to heal, etc. And so I think it's interesting to consider that we can do the deep healing work either within already existing relationships or solo, right? And so I chose personally to do a lot of it, not solo in the sense that I wasn't like dating and having relationships, but I wasn't married and I wasn't making that long, huge, like that big commitment of like having a family, which is just at another level, I think now, if I can say that. I mean, so I did a lot. I just knew like I had different partners and lovers and like that people I lived with, but I just knew like this is part of my healing. This is part of my journey. This isn't like the place that I stop and say, this is it. And I kept wondering, well, am I going to have that place, you know? And it felt like an eternity before I met my partner now. And even when I met him, I was like, I don't know, you know, like that trust piece. I was like, I don't know if this is it, you know, I'm still just being curious and listening and leaning in. For me, I had to trust in that particular moment in my life that the shared values that we had and that the people that brought us together were people that I could trust, and that the values we had in common I could also trust. But it still took me a while to actually lean in to, can I trust this relationship and can I trust this love? And I had to get through a lot of my own kind of like ego blocks and ideas. And I feel like part of being a super empowered woman who's, you know, like done really cool shit, like, and traveled and studied and with great spiritual teachers and all this stuff, is that I had a bit of like a long list of entry, which ended up that it could be like a bit of a self-protection, which I do see for some women as well who I work with. It's just like, okay, wow, you must be super perfect if you're asking someone to show up like that, right? And I kind of think I had that. I'm like, oh, I'm so cool. I've like done this and that and this and that. And like, I'm only going to go out with someone if there's just like, you know, ABC, da, 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 da. And then I realized I wasn't as cool as I thought.
It's always a humbling experience.
I'm like, I'm a human too. Yes, your farts stink too. Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you. And fell off my high horse. And then I was like, oh, cool. From here, I'm more accessible to love, right? Like,
yes.
From here, that self-protection of like, oh, wow. I hear women say, like, God, there's just not any conscious men out there. There's not any of this. And I'm like, sorry to break it to you, sister. It's probably you, you know, and I can't say that for everybody, but I could in my scenario. It's like softening to be able to see beyond what my little eyes were trained to see or thought they wanted was a huge piece of my own healing around intimacy. And it really meant a lot of ego death, like at first. And I say that in like a very tongue-in-cheek way. I don't mean like some psychedelic ego death. I mean like being like, wait a minute, I thought that my relationship was going to look like this. Being like, well, it doesn't. You going to throw it out in the trash just because it doesn't look like that? No. You know, and so I had to go through so many, and I worked with my mentor at the time, and I'm like, this is a lot of grief. And just like, yeah, you're going to grieve all the things that you don't quote unquote get, but you get all these other things, but you're not going to get everything. So the stuff that you're not getting, you're going to grieve over. And I'm like, well, that's really sad. She's like, yeah, it is.
Welcome to Earth School.
And I'm like, wait a minute, because I used to date like the artsy people who like could talk to me about all these weird films that we both had watched, and now I'm not, you know, my partner's like, like, isn't that? I'm gonna cry about it. Oh my God, you know, like,
yeah.
And then I'm
which is
like,
not talked about enough.
Totally. And then I'm like, you can cry that I'm not going to go hiking with you on an 8-hour hiking trip, and I'm not going to back mountain camp or whatever. Not going to happen. Please cry about it.
You know? Yes. And like, we're not the same person, thank God.
No,
And
exactly.
I think this is such a beautiful track of like, you really do have to grieve all the paths you will not travel in order to fully choose the path that you will.
Yeah, and to
And
choose a person.
yeah, to walk that path with of like,
Yeah.
then they're not gonna be all the things in your mind that you imagined, but in many ways they'll be better, and there'll be things that you didn't even know you needed because we didn't know ourselves well enough
Yeah.
to know that we would actually need those things, and maybe our soul did, and that's why it guides us to these people. But yeah, it's so true. You really do have to go through that letting go. You're not gonna get they're not a fucking like doll that you order. It's like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Like they're a human being, and yeah, and our humanity in that is really beautiful. And I loved what you said, around like this idea there's no conscious men, and you're like, well, my loves, like it could be you, because I look around, I think there are so many incredible men around, but I think that the question is, and you said it, and it's so beautiful, are you able to let love in? Because it doesn't mean like there are so many badass women that I know that I'm like, you are a fucking badass. You are really cool. You have done a lot of amazing things. Like, wow. But that doesn't mean that you know how to let love
Exactly. Ding, 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 ding.
different.
Totally. And I was one of those that, I was definitely there,
Same.
and I,
Oh my God, same. When I met Patrick, I had a fucking shaved head and like was just so in my like wild, like fuck every convention. I'm just gonna take
Right.
what I want,
right.
and beautiful. I love that part of me. But like, did I know how to let love in? No, I knew how to use my sex to get what I wanted.
Same.
For sure. Didn't know how to let love in. And it wasn't until I was with Patrick that I was like, oh my God, guys are so afraid of intimacy. Like, eye roll. And then I realized, I was like, no, I'm afraid of intimacy. I have this
Right.
person here in front of me that all those other tricks and trinkets don't work. And he's like, whoa, can we just slow down? Like, be here with me. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that. That's really, and I was like, oh my God, I'm scared of intimacy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Wow.
And that's so beautiful to know. And that's one thing where I love working with women, is because like people like us, we made it through, right? You didn't stay there with the shaved head being like, I just want to be wild and da 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 da, and like same with me. And it'd be fine if we did. And but we essentially both wanted love and family, and we weren't those gals like that got married did you get married when you were 25? No, it's your first time.
No, I did. I eloped at 19.
Oh, you did? Oh my gosh, I didn't.
And then moved to
Sorry.
Brazil, and it was like not a conventional. That's a whole other chapter, but
Right.
no, it's still not conventional at all. And then really rejected love after that, and was a wild multi-lover human. So yeah, yes, that's why, because you're Brazilian. That's why we speak Portuguese together. My first husband, may he be blessed. Wherever he
Maybe
is.
even that's not that doesn't sound like a normal tradition. Not, I don't mean
No.
normal is a word. Traditional.
No, it's not traditional.
But for women like us who maybe are like, oh, you met your partner who you want to have a family with at a different era after you came into like feeling super empowered, da 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 da. I love supporting women to put down that that thing that often pushes love away, because it's like, it's great to be in that beautiful empowered place, but also if it's used as a shield or a weapon or a shtick or whatever, and you can't actually be vulnerable with another person. I only say this because I've been there, and I
girl.
here, and then I'm like, wow, actually, I thought I was being vulnerable, but I wasn't. Like you said, I've had to work on opening to intimacy. We've talked about that with some of our parallel childhood things, but I think I get at this in my book, and in a way I use storytelling to get in there, but it's like how we can soften our own hearts to let love find us, and how scary that is. It can feel really, really vulnerable. And then how much we have to feel when we actually do that softening. Then we feel all of the pain or the shame or whatever is underneath that mask of like but I'm gorgeous and badass and I've got it together and everything's great, but something underneath that's like, I actually really just want to be loved, but I'm afraid if I let you love me, you'll leave me, whatever that is.
Yeah. Oh
So
my
a lot of
God.
people spend a whole lifetime avoiding that voice that I just spoke of, which is just one voice, right? It's like everyone has their own custom, but a lot of people construct a life where they never have to go there, and you can make your life look glitz and glam and fun and sexy as fuck, but never feel that deep, vulnerable, like letting yourself be held, surrendering to a partner, which, that's partially where I when I met my partner, I was like, oh, no, he's too much of a man. Like, that's like a man. I was like, that's kind of a lot for me.
I can't control him. That's going to be difficult. Yeah. I felt that with Patrick. I was like, I can't control you with all my other tricks that I can normally control a man with. Oh, this is terrifying. What do I do?
Totally.
Yeah. And I would say it's Patrick's birthday today, and in his gratitude, we do this thing where we're like, where are we going to be on this day next year? And we, talk about like future projection gratitude, but then we usually start with just general gratitude of like the year that's gone by. And like I shared, like we've had a fucking intense year, and everything you're speaking to, I met Patrick when I was 25, and we went through a rocky time at that time. The level of healing that I was ready to do at that time, earned our way into a secure bond, had a season of like such merge, which was really beautiful. And then last year went through this rapid experience of like individuation and like breaking everything apart. And what I got to realize in that is that prior to that, I had trusted that we would get through anything because of my love, because of what I could bring, what I could do, what I could love through. But I didn't realize I actually hadn't fully trusted his love to get us through. And we share a mentor, and she says, if you haven't been loved when you felt truly broken, it's hard to feel truly loved. And yeah, to have that experience, and I was sharing such gratitude with him. We were both crying in the car, and I was just saying, like, I have never trusted anyone to love me the way I trust you to love me, because you loved me when I had nothing to give you. And I'm so trained, and we've talked about parallel childhood stuff of like being able to energetically center other people, being loved for how I can love them, for what I can give, for who I can be, versus like, I'm broken, I'm messy, I don't know who I am, I don't know what ways up and down, I'm making mistakes, I'm like, I can't give you anything. And for him to stay and be like, I love you, I'm going to love you through this. That's okay, for who you are, not what you can do for me, not what you can promise me, not what you can offer me, not your perfection. And I would have never got to experience that from him if I didn't let myself fall apart, make the mistakes, get in the mess. I had to kind of have this fall from grace, if you will, so that I could experience being truly loved for who I am and go, oh, I can trust your love. You actually love me. But and he has actually loved me, probably before that, during, after, but I couldn't feel it until I let him really, really see. I thought I'd let him see all of me, but like, yeah, you go through life and just shit happens and you're like, oh my God. So yeah, it's the path of the transformational path of the heart. It's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Not, because you gotta let yourself mess up and get messy and be seen in your little
shit
broken hearts. Yeah, that are super lovable. But it's not like I always have it together and I always look Instagram ready. It's like, this is not it at all. Yeah, it's a deep, I don't know. I totally, I referred to you as being in your 30s, and I forgot because you're so wise that, are you
Yeah, no, I'm 31.
Oh, you're 31.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Oh, I thought you just said you're 25. They're like, how many years have you guys been together?
No, I met him when I was 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was a baby. I was like, at the time, I thought I was so grown up, but I was like, I was a fucking child. I've like grown up.
You are wise. You're wise.
Thank
I
you.
love you.
Wise. So tell us more about your book. I mean, you're such an incredible storyteller, and I love the way you write because it's raw. Like you give it all, and you share the most intimate details and the juicy bits, and it's usually very, very funny as well as extremely
Thank you.
deep.
I really would like to be praised for that more often. So thank you.
Yeah, you're funny, Mama. Really funny. I whenever we're together, I always have such good laughs with you. You're very quick.
Oh, thank you.
Hilarious.
I have a
and
particular sense of humor, right? It's like, yeah, I have a it's a particular style, not for everyone.
It's
But
for me.
thank you. I I come from a film and TV background, and so, you know, a little over a decade ago, I wrote a show called Be Here Now, so it was like a comedy satire about spirituality, and I've written screenplays and gotten awards and all kinds of things in the past before I made the switch from a Hollywood type of career into working in wellness and coaching and spirituality. But I wanted to have this book not be like a straight up self-help book that's like, here's how to da-di-da in 5 easy steps. I wanted to be like, let me tell you about this time. Come sit with me by the fire, and I'm going to like take you on a wild ride. And at the end, you're going to be like, whoa, oh my gosh, I felt this and I felt that. Similar to like if you're watching a movie or a TV show, which a lot of us love movies and TV. And like I said, I come from that background. So I love art. I love movies and TV. I come from art. And sometimes wellness and spirituality and self-help and all that gets a bit dry and formulaic and very kind of like
repetitive,
analytical mind, kind of like
impersonal.
Yeah. And it's like, what were we doing, especially as women, but also as humans before that? Before it was like, neuroscience has told us that this and that and the other. Before we were relying on scientists to tell us who we were, what was telling us? We were sharing from our heart. We were like, well, this is what my husband does when I take my clothes off, and it's like, so part of that, because it's like the internet and the age of information and technology has like gone away. So anyway, I wanted to tell about the heart, about emotion, about feeling, about embodiment through stories and sharing some of my stories. Like, how do you know whether you can trust love or trust a man? Sharing a story about when I made a decision that was totally against what I felt in my body and totally got me into trouble. It ended up going, on some dates with a guy who ended up later getting like convicted of stalking women in LA and all this stuff. So, telling those kinds of stories of like what happens when we abandon our intuition and our felt sense in our body. They're not all cautionary tales. Don't worry. There's also like what happens when we lean into the potential for love and we're surprised in like this beautiful way. And there's some of those love stories in there too. So my desire is that as a teacher, as a mentor, as a guide to other people, specifically women usually, that you can feel my heart, that you can feel my truth, my experience, that there is not some, wall, that I'm not on the stage. There's not some veneer of like hierarchy, though I do have expertise that is cultivated over time, but that you can feel me deeply. And that's my desire with this book, that you come on a feeling journey with me. And through that, you feel yourself and your own stories. And that's already happening. People are messaging me. They're like, oh my God, you were sharing about this. And I started thinking about this. I started thinking about this time in my life. And I hadn't really thought about that. And I haven't really processed that. And, so it's through that felt experience that we kind of heal, together. So yeah, I really hope that people can enjoy it. It's less, like I said, because it's not formulaic. It's not like I can market it like in the same way as a traditional self-help or spiritual book. It's like you have to lean in with me a little bit and come cozy up at the fire of my stories. And yeah, so
it's a transmission, it sounds like, which is rather than step by step. Which that's art. It's storytelling.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I am a writer. I'm a writer first and an artist first, in terms of just like my gifts, and then I think a coach and a teacher second. And I love being able to bring that depth of artistry to all that I do, actually. That's upstream, and then bringing that into teaching, bringing that into work with people. Yeah.
Yes, yes. What would you say to the women who are listening that have resonated and they're like, oh man, I want to love, but I feel so armored right now. Obviously, one, buy your book. But what else would you like those hearts to hear that feel armored in this moment but want to open to love?
First, acknowledging it is huge. So the fact that you're having the thought of like, maybe I have some heart armor up. Maybe I have a little barbed wire around myself. Maybe I'm quote unquote killing it in these areas, but I'm closed in this area. Like, just the fact that you're admitting that is a really big deal, because it took me a long time to just, I blamed all the potential suitors. It must be them. Oh, and then I was like, oh wait, what if there's something in me that's like not fully surrendering? That's not really letting go of the reins, letting myself be led, letting myself be held, all of this. And so I would say enjoy the journey of as much as you can, which I think you can a ton, of the de-armoring, of the softening, of the letting yourself be not empowered and badass all the time. And be, and like let that practice be something that feels really, really fun and really exciting. And I've had so many women come through my coaching practice, and one woman who I worked with for like a year and like almost 2 years. She's an author. Her name's Ebony Janice Moore, and her container for coaching is called A Chance to Be Soft. And she was like, I just have never had a chance to be soft. I've always had to be the strong one and the powerful one. And a lot of us have that story, whether we're claiming it or not. Or maybe it's the shiny one, or like the like cute one, but like whatever mask is actually just not really allowing your heart's yearning to come through, and letting your heart yearn to be held. It's super vulnerable. Like letting yourself not always be on, or not always be the expert, or not always be the perfect mom, or not always be the perfect friend or whatever, but letting yourself be in that vulnerable, like, I yearn for connection, I yearn for love. To me, that's where it starts to go, oh, okay, she's serious about letting us in, right? Like love, that's love talking love. So yeah, just like I would say in a nutshell, go on the journey and enjoy the journey. Find your people, find your guides, find your books, find your practices, whatever it is, and then have fun with it. Because I tell my clients, I'm like, I mean, not a bad curriculum, right? Oh, I need to soften my heart. I need to do some sensual dance today. I need to cry in the tub today. I need to read some poetry today. Those are some of the fun parts of the journey, right? There's the hard work.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, Rach and I have been calling it the path of the sensual mystic, but it's all the same. The part, like you say, the transformational path of the heart, emanation, love, all the juicy good goods. So where can people find the book?
So the book, Dare to Feel, The Transformational Path of the Heart, is available anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, IndieBound, Sounds True is the publisher. You can follow me at Alexandra Roxo, and I've got it listed on my Instagram. And then my website is my name. And I have a group mentorship program where I do practices like these, like that I just spoke of. Well, I don't get in the tub with you, but I will give you practices to do. And then I also see clients one-on-one, but a little bit more limited since I have a little baby now.
Since little Lou is in the world. Thank you so much, my love. I hope everyone listening
to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you. To feel you. And thanks for being my first podcast back after a little hiatus. So much ease and love.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Everyone listening, go get a copy of Dare to Feel.
Yes. All right, everybody. Lots of love.